What's up, everybody? It's supposed to be baseball season. I know Rob wrote about it last week about how we're all missing it. Snapper season supposed to be here Thursday. Not happening, obviously. We don't have any baseball, but we thought we would give you some sort of Snappers opener the best we could. So we got a couple of fellas here that have been around the Snappers either years ago or more recently. And we've got a whole rundown of innings because I'm a nerd and nerded out on this when we put it together. And we're kind of going to go around the horn style and just share some Snappers memories and ridiculous stories and favorite players and whatever else. But first, we got to exchange the lineup cards, of course, before we hit the first inning. So we'll go around the horn here. I'm Eric Schmolt. I'm the sports editor of the Janesville Gazette. Worked for the Snappers, I think, from 2000 to 2004, somewhere in there. I might be a year off one way or the other. Did some grounds crew, poured some beers. A lot of grounds crew. Dippin' Dots, I think I shelled out some Dippin' Dots. And I've been going to games since I was a little kid and still go like once a year. So I feel like I'm still in tune with the Snappers at least a little bit. So that's it for me. We got Rob here. Rob, give us your background with the Snappers.
So I worked for the Snappers in 2000 with you. I think I only worked till 2002, I believe. And then I picked back up again in 2006 or 7 when I started working for the paper. It must have been 2007. And I ended up being their beat writer, and then I was official scorer for a couple seasons. The Beloit Daily News, the one that I got you a job at. You're welcome. So I was official scorer, and I was a beat writer for a couple years. And then, I still went to a few games kind of after that. I went to games as a kid. My dad would take me to games because it was cheap entertainment for us all the time. So that was kind of my first foray into it.
Well, save that for the first inning, hey?
Oh, sorry. Okay,
we got lineups to finish here first.
Jeff, go ahead.
All right. I am Josh Flickinger. I am the co-sports editor of the Beloit Daily News. Rob Lucas got me the job there 8 years ago. So I've got 3 different stints with the Snappers. The first one was in 1998 when I was an intern. The second one was around 08, 09, that area when I was did some official scoring duties. And then the third was from 2012 to this point where I've been the main beat writer and go to a bunch of games every year. So it's been a fun, I guess, 22 years now.
Jeff, what's up?
Well, I guess that leaves me. I'm not a writer. I am a Phi Ed teacher in Waconia, Minnesota right now. Elementary, it's a ton of fun. It's great. But I started working the Snappers, I think it was 98 through 04. I had about 6-7 years. You name the job, I did it. I started mainly in concessions and then did grounds crew, hawk beer all the time. They had me doing everything, so it was a lot of fun.
Perfect. So that's your crew here. Rob already tried to step into the batter's box and take a swing at the first pitch before it even got thrown.
I'm aggressive.
We'll get to the first inning here. First inning, we are going to share your earliest memory of Beloit baseball. Some of us, most of us, probably it's the Beloit Brewers, who were before the Snappers. Like Rob said, I think for our parents, it was anybody who was, or your babysitter or whatever, it was like your cheap entertainment. You could get into games for a few bucks. There's pictures that I don't really even remember, but it was probably like my 5 or 6-year-old birthday party where we're all kind of like standing around down the third base line and have baseball cards and hats and whatever else on. So I've probably been going to games since I was 3 or 4 or 5, somewhere in there.
I'm sure I went to games before. It was the first one I really remember, and Josh will probably be able to tell me the year for sure, because wow, was B.J. Surhoff on a rehab stint with the Beloit Brewers, which I thought was in '94. That was when I thought it was. I looked up his baseball reference, and he had some rehab stints there. I would have been about 10 then. And I remember it was a big deal because he was the first overall pick and he was coming down to Beloit and, signing autographs, was actually pretty good about it. My dad always tells me about how he was really good about signing everybody's autograph and stuff like that. But I remember my dad always getting free tickets off WBEL they'd always give away. And it was always the joke of like, if you paid for a Snappers ticket, or a Beloit Brewers ticket, you were an idiot. Like you could get them for free all the time. And then he would also go and like bring me to games after the 6th inning when it was free, when they'd let people walk in for free after the 6th inning. So we'd go in and watch like the last 3 innings of a game, and he'd get popcorn, and then I'd get to watch a baseball game and then leave. So
that's a win-win. That's a win-win. I don't have a real great story surrounding my first Beloit experience. Surprisingly enough, even though it was only 20 minutes up the road, and we'd go to 4 or 5 Brewer games a year, we didn't really go to the Snappers that much, or at that time the Brewers. But I do remember going when I was like 7 years old, and ironically, it was 1985, so I'm much older than all of you. And that was the year that B.J. Surhoff initially, I believe, went through there in '85, and that was a big deal because, like you said, he was the #1 pick, and he was, everybody knew he was going to be in Milwaukee, which he turned out to be. 2 years later, hit 299 in '87, but who's really counting? But it certainly, like, as we went into, my teenage years, we would go to Rockford Expos games. Remember those? Remember the Rockford Expos with the Shields and Grissom? Marquise Grissom played on those teams. So we didn't go up to Beloit much, but I did a couple times when I was 7, 8 years old because the Expos came in '88. So that's what I got.
Yeah, Beloit Brewers was definitely where it started. I don't remember watching a whole lot of the games because I was always in the concourse, because that was when they would allow us to go run out, get foul balls, run back in, run out, run it, as long as they saw you go in and out. So then, we would get as many foul balls as we could handle. We were fighting people for those things. It was just crazy because then the guys were so good about giving you every autograph, just walking as they were going to the clubhouse. And it was just a ton of fun as a kid getting I was a baseball nerd at that time. So, I don't know what age I started it, but went there as many times as we could.
Until a couple of years ago, I think my dad had like a bucket of foul balls still from Pullman Field. And I think I used them to help like a little league team batting practice or something, and probably got rid of them. But there was still like a full bucket of balls. And I think going back to the B.J. Surhoff thing, my dad loved B.J. Surhoff, and I think it was probably for the same reason. He probably went and saw him in Beloit. And so you remember those like starting lineup figurines you could buy? I definitely had like a B.J. Surhoff tearing off his mask, like starting lineup.
Awesome.
Good times. We're going to move on to inning number 2. Favorite Pullman Field concession. I could go a lot of different ways with this one, but I'm going to let somebody else go first. Flick, why don't you just start us off with a concession?
Well, I'm getting into kind of a gray area here with the legality of some things that I've done since I've been a Snappers beat writer. But
there's going to be a lot of that in here, so feel free to just run with it.
Let's just say that I've taken some liberties from time to time with the free concession items. As you guys know, there are 3 different stands, and there have been occasions on which I would spend 1 ticket at each of the 3 stands, which I'm pretty sure that I was only intended to take 1. But, I kind of viewed that as you're welcome for the coverage, because literally there was no other media outlet ever at any of these games, with a rare exception. I guess the most unique item that I'd say they have probably is the Snappy Burger, which I believe – I don't know if there's some brats in there, some nacho cheese, but I would just sample a little bit from here and there, a potpourri, if you will. But I don't have – they used to have ice cream at one stand, so I'd get dessert around the 7th inning. My kids would always come, and, they would take one of the things. So I've really consumed probably in the hundreds of thousands of calories at Pullman Field over the years.
Yeah, welcome to the club. Since I made everything, I had to try it, right? Any one specific item, we used to have grilled ribs and corn. That was one of my absolute favorite. That was like just one thing. But then if we would combine different things all over the place, like the nacho cheese dog that we would make every once in a while. We used to sell tacos there. We had a taco stand, and we would just combine a whole bunch of stuff all over the place for that one. But yeah, I think just like you said, the combination of everything was really good. But if I'm picking one, it's those ribs and corn.
First Base Grill, by the way, shout out. I think number one in my book's First Base Grill, but I'm gonna go like a weird route here and say beer, and because I just have like weird. There's great stuff. You know, I would do like the grilled chicken sandwich from the First Base Grill, but I feel like I sort of almost learned how to drink beer at Pullman Field, and it wasn't legal. We'll go back to the legality of things. Like like a really terrible story is when we were restocking the Pepsi coolers every night after games. I remember there was a specific night where I was like trying to figure out what beer was, and it didn't really taste good yet, you know. And I guess Rob, you're weird because you don't like beer still at this point, but I wanted to try to like make it taste better, and so I like dumped out half of a Pepsi and like filled the rest of it with Miller Lite, thinking that would be a good idea, and it was not. It was really, really bad.
I think I remember that night.
But since then, now I just like appreciate it's a place where you can still go for like $1 beer night or $2 craft beer night or whatever those specials are at this point. I went to a game last year. I think it's $2 crafts, and so you can get a couple beers, get the good stuff.
Yeah, I never illegally stole alcohol from the Beloit Brewers or Snappers. Just
You really missed out.
Yeah, apparently.
I can't count the number of times I filled a Pepsi cup from the main stand with a Miller Lite and then drank it through a straw.
Oh.
I'm going to have two options here. The first was the first thing I sold, which was not actually very good, but the fact that they had a 16-year-old hawking hot roasted nuts in the middle of a baseball stadium. I don't understand. Like, I literally had the big roller. I was roasting them up and stuff like that. They didn't taste anything different. They were just slightly warm. But I don't know if you guys remember Brian Shacko, whatever his name was. He made the Shack Dog, and which was a hot dog with cheddar cheese on it and like shredded cheddar cheese and some stuff. I always found that to be a divine little treat for myself. So I'll go with the Shack Dog.
Good stuff. Mostly for free or stolen, which is phenomenal. Inning number 3. Give me a Snappers memory that involves your family somehow. Start with Jeff.
All right. This is a picture that I found. It was the year after I stopped working there. And see if we can figure out. That is at the time my girlfriend. And me on the other side. And then the guy in the Snappy is...
She's your wife now. Let's make sure people
know. My wife. She's my wife, yep. And that's you, Eric, inside that Snapper hat. I'm just saying.
True.
So we went there. I don't know. I was in a Wisconsin trip all the way back. We hit a Brewers game, and the next day we did that. And we got to be a part of a whole bunch of the on-field things that we never could have because we were always working there. And did the pot of gold, I think is what it was, like trying to find it and that they spin me and do that. And then got to go into the room and put on the Snappy hat. I think I put it on next. Oh, I just lost it. But that was probably, oh yeah, there we go. Let's see if it pops up on that one. Oh, and of course it's keep on moving. But there's me with the Snappy hat. If I twist it too much, it might flip around again. There we go. So that was probably my most fun memory, non-working there with my family and my then wife or then girlfriend, now wife.
Nice. I like that. A lot of Snappy days. So we can maybe get into some more of those. I tried to invite a Snappy, but he's out doing some yard work. So we'll see if he pops in here at some point randomly. I don't have like a specific memory, but there was definitely like in the Little League days, if we didn't have a game, my dad would just take us down to a Snappers game almost like every night that there wasn't like a practice. We didn't have practice or a game or something. So that's where all those foul balls came from. And we'd always sit there like picnic tables down the first baseline. And so you weren't like in the stands, so you had a lot more free reign to run and try to corral those balls. And God, there were like fist fights under the bleachers, and kids hopefully not getting drilled in the playground and whatever else. So the foul balls are, with my dad and brother, pretty good memory.
I'll go. This is a more recent one. When I was official scorer, Eric Van Dyke, who was the media relations director there, he was the announcer. I was the official scorer. We would sit in the press box with, nice summer night, the windows open, and we would just you know, say things that 26-year-olds would say back and forth to each other all the time that were maybe not the most appropriate. But I remember my sister and dad and brother-in-law came to a game one time, and they were sitting like 3 rows in front of the press box. And we, like, Eric and I were just talking the whole time. And all of a sudden I just remember my sister popped her head up into the window. It was like, you know, we can hear you, right? And Eric and I were both like, this was like, you know, a season into us doing this. So that was a sobering moment, but we never got fired prior to or after that, which really tells you something about what's going on there. But yeah, that's mine.
Okay, I've got a couple. I've got a lot of them actually, but I've got a couple pretty good ones, I think. So these have both come since I've been an employee at the Daily News. Again, just activity that I shouldn't be partaking in. So I can't rely on the fact that I was 26 or 7. But we would oftentimes on these Sunday afternoon games, I would come with some friends in the form of nieces and nephews. And the way we would gain entry, especially in the early years, like 12, 13, 14, is during the game, because they could not, this was a bunch of little kids. There's no way they could take a 3-hour game plus me staying after. So I'd show up in like the 3rd inning, right? Because really in a baseball game, what happens in the first 2 innings? That's really going to, you know, right. So we would show up and we would wait in between innings and we would just go through the bullpen gate, okay? And usually it was just me. Like I would always go in that way because I just park, you know, out beyond the left field fence and in the players' lot and just walk through the bullpen, hop the fence in by the beer garden over there, and then go in. So, but this one time was a little strange because I had like 6 kids. So it is in between the top of the 3rd and the bottom of the 3rd. And we are going in and I am followed. It was like a mother duck with her ducklings. And there are these 6 people and the entire Snappers bullpen is just going like this. Like, what in the world is going on? And I'm like, hey guys, all these little kids are hopping the fence. We go in. That's not the end of the story. So it's about the 5th inning, and I'm sitting down the left field line with all these kids. There's literally probably 6 kids, my whole car full of them. And there's a foul ball that goes in on beyond the left field fence. And the oldest of the kids, who's probably about 11 at the time, immediately jumps up, hops the fence that we hopped over, and sprints through the bullpen gate and gets the ball. The game is absolutely going on at this point. He comes back the same way, and people are just laughing, and I'm just got my head buried. I'm like, I cannot believe this just happened. And he comes back, and I'm like, it's Wade, Rob. I was like, Wade, what were you doing? He's like, well, that's how we came in. Like, you can't go back out there during a game. Oh, it was classic though. He had the ball. He was really happy. I'm like, just don't ever do that again. And then the second one, this is a more brief one, is my middle son Sawyer is a raging lunatic, and from the time he came out of the womb, and he was about 8 years old, and just a foul ball, like any foul ball, no problem. He is sprinting to get. He'd come home with there was a game where he came home with like 10 of them, right? So he's going over to by the visitors clubhouse. There's that high fence, which has got to be 10 or 12 feet high. So the ball goes just over there. Him and a teenager are running after it. And the teenager, who has sense about him, stops when the ball goes over the fence. Sawyer scales the fence in about 0.4 seconds, jumps off the 10 feet, comes up, gets the ball, shows the kid, and the kid just looks at me and he goes, "Are you serious?" I'm like, yeah, that's what he does. And that was just one of many Sawyer stories where he's scaling fences and diving and just coming up scraped and bruised and just comes back with a ball every time. So those are my family stories.
I've seen some of Sawyer's exploits at the game. It is impressive and scary all at once.
Absolutely.
Love it. Rob and I had our youngsters on here before we got this thing started. I'm looking forward to, hopefully, if everything goes well and this new Snapper Stadium gets built and there are still seasons, and baseball, eventually actually begins again at some point, taking the kids to the game. So one of the things I'm certainly looking forward to. Let's get to the fourth inning. This is good. We're not on a pace for like a 3-hour and 15-minute game here. Your favorite Snappers player ever? And this could be, we said a Surhoff. There obviously have been some good guys coming through on rehabs. There have been a couple of guys that came through. Or you can just take it way off the map and just go somebody completely random. Who wants to go first?
Well, I've got it here.
Go ahead.
Oh, you got him. There he is.
Yeah, Prince Fielder.
What happened to his hat?
This used to be in my boys' room. So he and Ricky Weeks are missing their hats somehow. So,
Okay.
but obviously we're going to be talking about the 2003 team here pretty soon. But I mean, he was the most fun guy to be around because that was when we were doing grounds crew. So he was around all the time. He got to know us a little bit. I talked with him a whole lot. I mean, and his dad was around a lot during that time. So he was just a guy that you could root for as a player and then as an actual human being. I mean, he was 18 years old or something like that, but he was just a genuinely nice person. And it was really fun to see him in a Snappers uniform and just like going through and even though he knew he was destined for the major leagues, he took in everything that the coaches everywhere would talk to him about. So that was a guy that I got to know a little bit and just loved being a part of that. Rob?
Yeah, I'll echo that. It was Prince. And that, like, I remember him in 2002 when he came up he had a really brief stint in 2002, right at the end of it. And that was when I was working there, I was vending beer and stuff like that. And I remember, like, I watched his first home run because I was in the crowd vending beer. And every time he came up, because I knew who he was, because I cared about the minor leagues, stuff like that, I would stop working and just watch his at bat. And I'd have people like asking for beer in the background, and I would tell them to quietly sit down because Prince Daddy was up. And you need to watch Prince Daddy hit. And he just tattooed one over the left field fence for his first bomb. And it was just so impressive. But as a writer, because I'm sure Josh has guys that he enjoyed talking to as writer and stuff like that. Ben Revere, who was the Twins' first-round pick, really liked Ben. He was super nice. Joe Benson was a second-round pick for the Twins. He was awesome. And then Jeff Manship went to Notre Dame, was like, he was like a late 9, 10, 11-round pick. But he made the big leagues for a while as a reliever and stuff. They were all on that team that was really good. They made Game 5 of the title, and then Chris Parmalee, their big bonus baby, let a ball go under his glove to lose for an error out in right field, and then they ended up losing the game 5-2 or something like that. Parmalee was kind of a jerk, but the other guys, they were all super nice and super friendly, really good about answering interviews and questions after games and stuff. They were awesome.
Yeah, I would have to say, growing up, I didn't have a favorite because, I didn't really go to the games. In '98, we had Bucky Jacobson, who was a minor league legend. And then later actually had a nice little run with the Mariners for about a season and a half, where, of course, he was a huge, fan favorite and stuff because his name was Bucky. He was 6'5" and just an enormous human. He had red hair. He had all the characteristics of a fan favorite. But since I've been covering, I'd say the guy with the best ability that also combined being a really super guy was probably Matt Olson. I would talk to Olson most nights. So he and I got to know each other pretty good. He was a great guy. And obviously he's been, he's a really good first baseman now. And so those are probably my two answers.
I like the Prince years. The best part about that was Jeff and I graduated in 2002. So he was the same age as us. So it was what? This is ridiculous. But that was definitely fun. We'll talk about 2003 here in a minute. And actually my favorite player is from that, but I'm going way off the radar here. And it's a guy named Tom Wilhelmsen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rob and I know him.
Yeah. I had to do a little digging because in my memory, he was a first round pick who was a $2 million signee or something, because he would showed up to Beloit in some $50,000 car. But I looked it up and he was a 7th round pick with a $250,000 bonus. So really he spent a fifth of his bonus money on his car just so he could show up to Pullman Field looking like a hotshot. And he was pretty good that year. But then like the rest of his story is ridiculous because he like got suspended a couple times for smoking the reefer, like fell completely out of baseball, was working the bartending at like a tiki bar in Phoenix or Scottsdale or something like that for 5 years, but then somehow resurged himself back in the league. I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago. He played for like the Mariners. Actually, Wikipedia told me he had a save in a game that had a 6-pitcher no-hitter. So he's like part of a no-hitter. So he like sort of still found his way to the big leagues. But every minor league team, every season, there's that guy who just like runs out and spends his bonus money on an extravagant vehicle for no freaking reason. Like everybody else is carpooling in a Toyota Corolla, but that guy pulls up in a Mercedes. And of course, it's almost always the person that like flames out on doing something goofy. And he was that guy, but at least came back around and made something of himself. So cool. Good on him for that. And he was part of this 2003 team, but he gets overshadowed now, of course, because so many guys came from that team. I think, obviously, I haven't been around for all of the seasons, and so there's been other playoff runs and things like that. But to me, like the 2003 season deserves its own inning. So we're going to the 5th inning here. We're going to talk 2003. We had Prince, who we've talked about. Tony Gwynn Jr. was there. Ricky Weeks for a spell. There were big league pitchers, Dennis Sarfate, Manny Parra, Wilhelmsen was on that team. Like, ridiculous. And like the best part of like this era was that you would see guys that were going to be in Milwaukee, hopefully in the next couple of years. So you were following that, and you were following their first steps of their journey. And this team just seemed to have guys that were fast tracked to there. And so it was fun then. I think that season was fun. And now it's also fun to just like look back and to see like who made it and what that season was all about.
Well, I think for me, that 2003 season, I mean, like you said, all the amount of people that were on that you just think of like, okay, they're going to be there. They're going to go up. But then they were so like really nice and friendly with each other and all the fans and stuff. I remember Tony Gwynn Jr., his bobblehead got broken. I couldn't find him. But his first at bat was like a 2-run bomb. And people started, oh my gosh, he's great hitter just like Prince. And then people said, yeah, that's not what he does. And so then we were trying to like get everybody to calm down. He's not really a home run hitter, but man, that was so much fun watching those guys. And then since we were in the grounds crew at that time, we were always out by the bullpen. So we got to meet a lot of those guys and just the kind of craziness that they were. And Wilhelmsen, a lot of fun. Parra was kind of a jokester too when he was wanting to be. When he got serious, it's a little bit different, but I mean, that's what a starting pitcher needs to do. And those really fun times.
And those guys like Prince and Tony, it was fun because their dads were there for a lot of that summer. So they would like sit behind home plate and watch. And from my recollection, it was like Tony Gwynn was like the really nice guy, of course, because he always was. And then Prince's dad, Cecil, was nice. Like if you called him Cecil and like didn't interrupt the game, but if you like interrupted the game or called him Cecil, then things like went completely off the rails, I think is what my recollection of that was.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. See, I remember Cecil being there, and I always had a soft spot for Cecil Fielder because I was a bit of a Husky baseball player. So, and I was number 45. So I always appreciated Cecil Fielder a bit. But I remember like they told us like menial workers, like, like our food people, don't talk to him. That 2002 year, don't talk to him. Like he's not allowed to be talked to. But I remember he'd walk right by at that point I was Papa John's pizza guy. He'd walk right by the Papa John's stand. I'd just be like, hi, Cecil, like very quietly to myself so I could say I talked to Cecil Fielder. But I was just looking up the roster of that team really quick. And like Manny Parra was the guy I thought was going to be so good for the Brewers. I thought Parra was going to be just this lefty filth, and he was not. He was lefty. He was not filthy. But I really thought Parra was going to be good. And for some reason, I remember Calix Crab or Crab.
Calix Crab, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that name, and I'm like, boy, was he supposed to be a good baseball player? Because he was also not a good baseball player.
I think he was like really fast, right?
I think so, yeah.
Well, that's kind of the main thread between all those guys, right? That's the crazy thing. And I think I'm sure part of the reason they're trying to reduce, cost by reducing teams is that you've got 4 or 5 players and then you've got 20 guys that are just filler. Now you don't always know which are the filler guys, but it's crazy. 03 was it was a fun year for me. That was my only year ever where I have been a minor league baseball announcer. 140 games for the Greensboro Bats. And we had Jeremy Hermida, we had Scott Olson, Robert Andino. We had like 6 – none of them became stars, but we had like 6 or 7 guys from that team that went on to the big leagues, which is a really, as you guys know, is a really high, abnormally high percentage. Maybe even 8. So it was crazy. But I certainly kept up from afar. As Rob will attest, those were brewerfan.net or .com at one point, was founded in 01. And so I was like all over that. And I don't know if you guys remember, but there were a lot of people. I will share a Prince Fielder minor league story. So we had essentially one good player at the big league level in 2002, Richie Sexson, right? Everybody loved Big Sexy. So the Brewers are picking, I believe, 7th in the draft. Rob can correct me. He might know better. But I think we were the 7th pick.
I thought it was 8, but I'll check.
And so we've got, huge holes all over the major league level. 2002, we lost like 106 games. It was the worst team in team history. And sure enough, in that June draft, like, all right, anybody but a first baseman's good with me. And we pick a guy that not only was a first baseman only, we didn't even know if he could play first base. We might have just been the only National League team with 106 losses that just drafted a DH.
It was 7th, by the way. It was a 7th pick. It was a 7th pick. Yeah.
So, and I will never forget this. And this is I know is true. In his first game as a minor leaguer, he's out in Ogden.
Yep.
He's out in Ogden. And he hits a grand slam. And from that day, I was like, I'm all in. And it changed just like that. And from then on, like following his career, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be a star. I love him. But like those 3 weeks, I was like, I cannot believe we picked the DH. And what is this guy going to do? And my God, look at how fat he is, and he's 18. This is ridiculous. He's going to eat himself out of the minor leagues, let alone the big leagues. And then, the grand slam is all it took, and I was all in.
I don't know if you guys ever read Moneyball, the actual book, but they talk about about the 2002 draft. And they like laugh at the Brewers for taking Prince in the book because like the Athletics, were like, look at these morons taking this first baseman who can't play first base. Like they were so happy because it was going to drop Swisher, whoever they wanted, down to them. And I always think, and my dad always talks about that too, about how they were so happy. But it's like, actually, I would much rather have Prince Fielder than Nick Swisher's career.
That worked out all right.
Yeah.
Do you remember? So Miller Park was what, 2001? Was the first Snappers game 2002?
Oh yeah, 2001.
Yeah.
2001.
Was the first Snappers game 2003 there, or did they do one in 2002? I had a ticket stub, but I can't find it.
I think it was
3 was the first one.
Yeah.
And everybody was, the place was juiced because it had all these guys on the team. If I think they didn't open like the 3rd deck, but they probably could have had people in there. Like if it was like ridiculous. And they did a couple, I think, after that. I don't know if any of them were quite as cool. And obviously it wouldn't work now because people aren't, maybe what if it was the Timber Rattlers? Maybe they've still tried to do that in some recent years. But I just remember there was a flurry about going over there for this game at Miller Park just because they had these big names that were supposed to be playing there in a couple of years.
I remember batting practice, and those 3 guys got put in the same group for legitimate reasons. And they were, Weeks had been on the team for maybe a couple weeks, I think, at that time. It wasn't really a long time, but he had just as much pop as the other 2 guys, but they were going back and forth on home runs during batting practice and seeing if they could hit the slide that was up there, because that was still relatively new to everybody. And then just seeing how far it could go. It was just, they almost tired themselves out for the game by how hard they were trying to swing during that batting practice. It was crazy. And then the rush of the game, because we didn't sell, seats. It was just first come, first serve. And the people who just cruised into there, trampled by turtles legitimately like that. Come on now.
I'm going to use it as a segue into the 6th inning here. We've told some work stories anyway. If we got some good ones, we'll still go with them. I do, and it revolves around the 2003 game at Miller Park because Jeff and I got stuck like selling souvenirs, which was insane because same thing. There were so many people there, and they all wanted something like from this game. And so I think we were like, oh, sure, we'll do souvenirs. And it became like something we'd never seen. Sold more stuff probably than we ever expected. I think we ran out of a lot of stuff. But in like the 4th inning, somebody came over and was like, we need one more guy to run the sausage race. And I'm like, the legit like Miller Park sausage race? Yeah. And I'm like, I think I just beat Jeff to the punch in saying that I would do it. And I was like, all right, like I'm in, where do I go? And so I got to run the famous sausage race as the hot dog at Miller Park one time, so that's one of probably my more memorable life stories, let alone like Snapper story.
What place were you?
Oh, yes. That's a great question. So we set it up. We had to meet down in the left field bullpen area behind where the doors open. And we're like, oh, are we going to just like run this thing? Are we going to stage it? What should we do? And we concocted a plan where I like sprinted out as fast as I could. And I was going to keel over basically behind home plate. And I'm glad we did because I literally was like that tired by the time I got to home plate. And so then I finished dead last. And I remember actually like where they had us like walk up behind the third base dugout and up through the stands. My parents were sitting there like right on the edge of a row there. And they didn't know that I was in this because this wasn't like a day where you like texted people and you're like, hey, I'm going to be in the sausage race.
Right.
They just thought I was selling souvenirs out in the concourse. And so then sometime after the game, I think I called him or texted him or whatever we were doing at that point. It was like, hey, did you know that was me in the hot dog? And they were like, well, no, obviously we could tell it was you. But I like gave them a high five going up through the stands.
Awesome.
I was very jealous of that moment. Yeah, he did definitely beat me to the punch because I really wanted to do that.
Any other good work stories? Interviews, goofy scoring opportunities as official scorers or something like that?
Oh, I had one. Well, first, I was going to say for any work story was just anything involving Bob Preston, if you guys remember Bob.
Yes. Not my favorite boss ever, but
the grumpiest human being. He looked exactly like Tom Green, and I've never seen someone who was more upset about just existing in the world than Bob. But no, I had an official scoring time. It was trying to think who I can't remember who the manager was, but it was a pop up to shortstop. You know, the opponents hit this pop up to short, and it's, you know, sky high, should be an easy play, and it falls between 3 guys. And, you know, the rule, like they always say, is it's got to touch a glove, but I looked in the rule book and it doesn't actually have to touch a glove for it to be an error. And I know that, like, that's always going to be put down as a hit, but I was just so upset at that point, you know, and I'm like, that is an error. Like, that's a play that had to be made. So I put it down as an error. And then the Snappers coaches were so upset at me that I put it down as an error instead of whatever, you know, the reasoning was. I went to the other manager and he's like, I really appreciate you doing that. And that was their last game in town, so he didn't care. He was getting out of there. But Josh, who was the big, tall, old pitching coach that loved Grateful Dead?
Oh, Gary Lucas.
Gary was not happy with me. Gary, oh my God, you can't make that call. You can't make that call. And then whoever the manager was, Josh, was like, you go out there and try to catch that pop up. I'll send you out there to try to catch it. I'm like, it's not my job to catch it. I'm a sports writer. Like, what are you doing? So that was kind of one. I have another fun one, but I'll save that for the 8th inning there. So
I've got 2. If we got time for 2.
I don't think we're going anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. First one. You know, the first one's a funny one in that it was, you know, you always like to meet guys you grew up, you know, not necessarily idolizing, but, you know, who played in the big leagues, and they would always come through. You know, those minor league teams in Midwest League are just littered with assistant coaches and hitting coaches and pitching coaches that were like nominal big league players, right? No, never really stars besides the Ryan Sandberg, which Rob had a great one.
We'll get there.
I know you will. But these were not stars. These were not Hall of Famers. These were just pretty good guys. And the Brewers had a guy in 1985 and 1986 by the name of Danny Darwin. Now, Danny Darwin pitched for an abnormally long time in the big leagues, probably like 18 years. And so he was around forever. He was a Brewer for 2 years, but it's right in that sweet spot, where I was 7 and 8 years old and just a huge fan. And so I'm like, it was Clinton. I remember that. And I think they were a Giants affiliate back then. And so Danny Darwin's the opposing pitching coach. I'm like, oh, cool. I'll pop in. And, this is when I was an official scorer. I was like, perfect. I'll just, I'll say hi and it's nice to meet you. And so we have this game. There's a couple errors during the game, but none of them that were even questionable. We thought like it was one of those deals where you kind of look at each other in the press box and everybody goes, yeah, that's an error. Or, yeah, that's a hit. So no problem. It's a Sunday afternoon game. And back then, they have completely changed this now, Rob, by the way. Don't know if you know this. The official scorer literally can't have any contact with the managers now. It's got to go through PR. So, yeah, that was always the worst. I hate confrontation. And so I was terrified going in there. And I hated being an official scorer because of that, because one guy's going to be pissed at you. If it's a borderline play, either one manager or the other is going to be legit upset. So every game, I just pray for no errors or no questionable calls. So anyway, I was feeling good. There's nothing there. And he goes, I stepped into the Clinton coach's room, that little hole in the wall. And I said, hey guys, any questions? And Danny Darwin is in the corner. He's got his shirt off, just wearing like the stretch pants. And he goes, yeah, he's from Texas. He goes, yeah. He goes, that play that you called air on a shortstop? And I was like, yeah. He goes, I've been around baseball a long time, and that's the worst call I've ever seen. I was like, and so we talked it through, but I mean, I know I was in the right, but think about what that means. He probably played 4 or 5 years in minor leagues. He was a big leaguer for 18 years or so. He then coached. He's talking 30, 40 years of minor league of baseball experience. And I, the official scorer in Beloit, Wisconsin, just gave him the worst call he's ever seen.
Perfect.
It was unbelievable. And I'm thankful now because I have a story that came out of it. But otherwise, it was just truly horrifying in the moment where this guy's like 6'6". He's just sitting there just with a scowl. He just hates me so much. I just wanted to say, hey, great job in the 86 Brewers. he just ruined all that for me. Okay.
Don't meet your heroes.
The second one happened when I was an intern, and this is actually incredible. This was this is one of the best probably moments in my whole like sports type career. So it's like, it's probably early June. So I'd only been, when you're an intern, you come back from college, you don't even start till, mid-May. And so I'd been working there about 3 or 4 weeks. And back then they were awesome. We had a great groundskeeper who would just be like, hey, you guys want to hit some balls afterwards? They'd set up the cage. I don't know if you guys ever partook. There you go. Yeah. There's nothing better than taking batting practice. I was never even a baseball player beyond the age of 9. So I wasn't up there to hit, but I'd love to go out and shag balls in center field, And I was just, my max speed on the mound is about 60. So no arm whatsoever, but I could place it. So people love me as the batting practice pitcher because I'd throw strike after strike. So I get up there and I'm throwing BP, to the groundskeeper and the food guy and the GM, whatever. We're just going along, and out of the clubhouse walks Don Money. Now, Don Money retired in 1984 when I was 6. He was a little bit before my time. I see the bobblehead up there. But I, as a Brewer fanatic, knew Don Money's place in baseball and Brewers history on the 82 team. And he's just like, and he starts coming up, and Don, do you guys know Don? You can shake your head yes or no. Yeah? Everybody knows Don, right? So he's just a fantastic human being, right? And just kind of gruff. Yeah, this and that, whatever. So, I'm throwing to the, to the clubby, and, I'm in on his hands a little bit, and Don's like, same thing I see all day, Jam City. And, he's just talking trash to everybody who comes up. And then they're like, why don't you take a few swings, Don? And he's like, I'll get up there. And so he grabs a bat. And the next day, I'm 20 years old. And the GM, Matt Harris at the time, was like, Josh, you are throwing batting practice to Don Money. And I'm like, yeah, it was unbelievable. And he took me to the track a couple times, never took me out, but still had that swing, like that Don Money swing. Because it was only, he was older, but still like, probably 50. And could still hit it a long ways. It was pretty awesome.
The only time they let me swing a bat, it was like, there was times where they would like let workers or somebody take a couple cuts, and there was like one designated crappy bat that you had to swing with. You couldn't swing with like a real legit player's bat or something. And like I made contact, I think one time, and I broke the bat, and like the batting practice was over. It was just like, all right, you're an idiot. Thanks for that. We're done here.
No, we'd have these extended sessions that would last. I was not a drinker at that time, but everybody just be drinking. And they would go, we'd play for an hour or more after these games. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, Jeff, you got anything, or you want to move to the seventh inning stretch?
I got one quick one. So a lot of different, like you talked about, a lot of different coaches that we would see. Like some of those, when they were the Twins affiliate, they had roving hitting coaches, roving pitching coaches that would go up through the minors. Well, it just so happened that one time it's Paul Molitor. And Molitor was like trying to be just there during the day. So that was when I was working ground school. I was there from 7 a.m. to 12 a.m. pretty much all day long doing everything, right? Well, he pops in and people started coming in at about 6:30, and he's like, dude, I don't want anybody to see me. What can you do for me? I was like, well, what do you need? I'll just go get you that. And then he said, well, I'm going to be stuck in here. I'm going to tell you to go get me things, and you just go get it. And so he's like, I want peanuts. All right, got it. I want seeds. All right, got it. All right, I want a Coke. Like, all right, go get it. And there was just me going back and forth into the dugout, being able to hand him things. And he was so nice afterwards. And he's like thankful afterwards. And he's like, I just didn't want to see all these people. I'm like, all right, I understand, because everybody knew he was in there. So they're like reaching over, trying to get into there. I'm like, no, they were trying to get me to give them autographs. I'm like, I'm not doing that. It's not my job. But yeah, meeting Paul. And then he saw me the next day as well, because he was there, I think, like 4 or 5 days in a row. And like I said, just such a nice guy to talk about all those things with it.
Right on. We'll move to the seventh. This is just the seventh inning stretch. We'll stretch it out. You got anything random? I was just maybe going to say thanks. We've mentioned a few of those GMs that we worked for back through the days, like Shakow and Brian Barkowski. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. For all of their free beers and things over the years that they did or did not know about one way or the other. Thanks to the Snappers for all of that. Thanks for the merch that I might have pilfered after that Miller Park game, because you let me drive it home in my trunk and didn't have any tabs on it.
I got a random story here. So it's 2012. I'm not working for the Snappers anymore. I'm teaching at this point. But I'm still following the team and following this. They're a Twins affiliate at this point, obviously. And I see on Twitter that Keith Law says he's going to be in Beloit. He's coming to Beloit to watch. This was Miguel Sano, Eddie Rosario were on this team. And he's like, hey, I'm coming to Beloit. And I sent him like a message. And I'm like, hey, man, like, because I was still writing for the paper, doing random articles. I'm like, hey, could I talk to you before the game just to do like an article quick? He goes, well, no, I'm not going to get there, but just come over and say hi when I get there if you want. I'm like, cool. So I go up, and before the game, I see him. He's 5'6", so he's not hard to figure out who the guy is. And I go up and I'm like, hey, Mr. Law, I'm Rob. I talked to you on Twitter about stuff and everything like that. He goes, oh, cool. We talked for a couple minutes. He goes, you want to just sit down for a little while? And I'm like, sure. And I ended up sitting the entire game with Keith Law, talked to him about baseball. We talked about books, because I'm an English teacher, and he obviously likes books and movies and stuff like that. We were talking about that. Miguel Sano hit a home run over the center field trees, I believe, in that game. Like, it was massive. And I remember him coming back, because he was filming his at-bats, and he was coming back, and he mouthed like wow to me as he was walking back to the seat. But yeah, that was sitting with Keith was awesome for that whole game. And we talked about Brewer prospects and stuff like that, and kind of philosophy. It was really neat.
I have a very similar story. First of all, I want to tell a story about me and Rob and Keith Law. Oh gosh, Schmalti, you're gonna love this. So I don't even know if I could get through this because people love this story. My son, my 13-year-old son, literally just brought this up probably 4 days ago. Hey, remember when? Okay, so Rob is on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. Keith Law is on Twitter. And one day, Rob reaches out because Rob and Keith have remained in contact, evidently. So Rob will just hit him up every once in a while. And so he goes, "Hey, Keith." Oh man, he goes, "Hey Keith, I'm going to San Francisco, right? San Francisco."
Yeah.
And can you recommend any like breakfast spots for me? And I respond to Rob and keep Keith in the comments, and I said, why don't you check Yelp, you idiot? Okay, and it's just the kind of just stupid stuff that Rob and I do to each other. Meanwhile, Keith responds, he fires back at me. And he goes, you don't seem like a nice person. And then like 3 or 4 other people are just hammering me. Just like, you jerk. That was uncalled for. Just reading these responses, I'm just crying, laughing. And I'm like, Reagan, check this out. We were just, oh man. God, it was just classic. So every once in a while, I will call back to the check Yelp, you idiots. But I had in my very similar experience would have been, I think this was 2016 when my favorite player from my teen years, who was Jeff Cirillo, who is a disarmingly handsome human being, by the way. If you see, you will just get lost in his blue eyes and sandy hair. You just will think of nothing else than, my God, this guy's incredibly handsome. But anyway, so I went up and I talked I introduced myself and I said, "Hey Jeff, how's it going? I'm Josh. I'm with the Daily News. What are you out here doing?" He had just started, and I don't even know if he's doing this anymore, but he's scouting for the Mariners, and or I think it was the Angels actually. And so I'm talking to him for about a half an inning, and he goes, and it was good conversation and stuff. And he goes, "Well, you know what? I'm gonna move down here." And I thought he was like, "Okay, it's clear here. He's done with our conversation. I'm fine with that. This was great." And he goes, "Why don't you come on down with me?" So we just moved a couple rows. He wanted a different vantage point, like Rob's experience. Ended up chatting with him like the next, for the entire rest of the game. It's just me and Cirillo. There's like 250 people there on like a Tuesday night in July. And it was amazing. He was peppering me with questions. He's like, there's 3 guys in the major leagues that are shortstops with 40 grade speed, which is not good, or whatever the rating is. And he's like, "Who are they?" And I'm like, I was like, JJ Hardy. He's like, "Yeah, that's one." The other one's like Tulowitzki, and I didn't get that. And he's like, So but it was great though. I mean, it was an awesome experience.
I think some of my favorite memories, when we were on the grounds crew back in there, we had some guy, I don't remember, he was from Arizona or something, and we were under a tornado warning. And everybody was told, you got to get into the clubhouse, you got to get moving. And he stood out there and I said, "Buddy, what are you doing out here? You got to go." He goes, "I have never seen a tornado. I am staying here. I'm going to go into center field and I'm going to watch this thing happen." I said, "I don't think it's actually going to happen. I mean, if you don't know much about this, but there aren't any funnel clouds. I mean, it's somewhere maybe." He's like, "I don't care. I'm just gonna stay here." And then it started like pouring rain and he started taking off. But I mean, all those, there were times where it was like during the day we were playing catch or something because we had everything done, but then we knew the rain was coming. We had, I think it was Barkowski's little brother was an intern at the time. He was out in right field. He had gone to go get a ball. And then all of a sudden he's running and screaming. I was like, "Oh my God." And we didn't know what was going on. The sheets of rain were following him all the way to it. He's like, he was yelling at us because it was so loud with the rain. He's like, "You got to get the tarp on." So we were way late and ended up having to cancel the game, which was great. But it was just really funny watching him with the rain come running at us and screaming. It was those were some of my favorite times.
The tarp pulling days.
Tarp pulling, man.
Yes.
That's heavy.
All right. Good work. That was a better inning than I thought it was going to be. Let's move to the 8th. I just wanted to try to paint a picture forward because we got some new stuff coming with the Snappers. Hopefully, we don't really know where things stand with all the craziness going on, but We talked a little bit before we started recording here, and maybe Josh can just sort of fill us in on, there's supposed to be a new stadium breaking ground, a little construction here soon. Ideally, they'd be playing in a stadium downtown Beloit. It looks what do we call those? The photos or the mock-ups or whatever, the blueprints look phenomenal. It would be something completely crazy and awesome that we've needed around here for pretty much since we were patrolling Pullman Field in like 2002. And it's nice that it's looking like it's going to get done, and hopefully it still is. I have to wait until all the craziness settles down here. But Josh, just any like updates or where like where things kind of stand with the Snappers moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it all sounds positive, unless this virus just knocks out everything commerce related. This thing is going to move forward. I mean, it's pretty much a done deal. The groundbreaking was set, and now this has been pre-virus, but it was set for late this month that they were going to start on it. And it's been a long time coming. When Mr. Hendricks passed away, I've been told by multiple sources that this was kind of the next thing on their agenda, was to get the Snappers ballpark passed through. And it took, obviously it's taken over a decade, since then, and a lot of convincing, but Diane Hendricks stepped in, and as she's done with so many things in Beloit, said, yeah, let's do it. And when Diane Hendricks says, let's do it, it gets done. So there's an owner with some Janesville ties, actually, and I know you know all that, Eric, but has some property up in Janesville, owns the AA team, and I think Pensacola, the Wahoos, yeah, that's right. So has a big part in it, and it's going to be great. I know before we started recording, we talked about, there are some naysayers out there. Still nobody's going to come. Well, I do believe that, while the games will still be lightly attended just based on the weather, it's still going to be 45 degrees in April, no matter how big of a, beautiful of stadium you have. I do think that it's going to become a great attraction in the area on weekends, and even during weekdays in the summer when it's a beautiful day. The Snappers are now going to become a viable option for entertainment, as opposed to just kind of an afterthought, or unless you're a really super hardcore sports fan.
Well, could this too, Josh, eventually lead to more local teams trying to take over the player development for the Snappers too? Because that's why the Brewers left. That's why the Twins left, because the facilities were so crappy, and Oakland just kind of got left holding the bag on it. Do you think that other local teams could come back?
The problem is that, the Twins, I think, are in Cedar Rapids right now. They've got a nice facility. The Brewers, I don't think, are ever going to leave Appleton. That seems like a marriage made in heaven, unfortunately. And then you talk about other teams. The Cubs are in this beautiful ballpark in South Bend now. Where are the White Sox? Are the White Sox still in Kannapolis in the South Atlantic League? I don't remember. I don't think they have a team in the Midwest League. But, that's the thing, is what Major League Baseball is trying to do is get rid of these places with poor facilities. So, I don't see that being a big factor, unfortunately, because I know the Twins relationship, which is what most of you guys were around for, or I guess Brewers too. But anyway, that was a good relationship too. But eventually they're just like, okay, we're not going to wait any longer for a new ballpark, and we've got other places we can go that are better facilities. So, no, I don't necessarily think that, but I guess you never know.
Well, we lost our leader, but I can take over.
He's changing diapers right now.
Oh,
there he is.
There he is.
I had to go get my ninth inning prop here, and I think I was supposed to use it back in the fifth inning, but I used my closer inning in the fifth. I don't know. I got some weird Craig Counsell managing going on here, but the ninth inning here, as we move to close things up, you got to bring in your best drop the mic Snappers story. And since I guess I already used mine, maybe I should just start because it might be the worst one. But I have a home plate from Pullman Field, because when we were on the grounds crew, we replaced it. Horrible, it might have been there for 20 years. We dug it out. It's thick. These things aren't just that little flimsy plate you buy at Walmart for your kids. And so had my dad dig it out from wherever he's got it in the attic. just for this show here today. So here's home plate from, I stole home.
I remember doing that thing out. That was not fun. That was like an hour-long job just to get that one thing out.
Who's got a closer?
I've got one, but I kind of want to go last because
Ooh, I like
Josh
it.
knows mine, and it's
All
a
right.
doozy.
Well,
I'll go.
I can go, but Rob, you certainly know mine. Okay, this is a very rare circumstance in life when these kind of things line up. But I can even tell you the date, which is May 12th, 1998. It's my second day at work. And the general manager, Matt Harris, and I are in the office. And this girl walks in, this college-age girl walks in, and she's got curly hair. And Matt introduces, she has a name tag that says Madeline on it. And he goes, "Oh, I want to introduce you to Angie. She's one of our in-game." This was back when they had wait staff. Remember that? I don't know if you guys do. Yeah. Where they would come out and take orders and deliver food. That's been long gone, but that's what she did. Her name was, she's like, "Oh, this is Angie." And he's like, "I don't know, your name tag says Madeline." And I said, "Well, can I call you Maddie?" And that, she laughed because, wow, that's witty. And 22 years later, she's my wife now. And we met at that very moment at Pullman Field in that stinky, smelly front office. And that is my drop the mic story. That is that's a game changer right there.
That's a big one. Yeah.
That's a reaction right there.
Oh, look. Oh, he's got the, look at that.
Fancy.
You forgot to mention, Josh, the years of pursuit of Angie after that.
Yes, it was, for me, it was love at first sight. And for her, not so much.
Still waiting on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, at some point it's going to turn around in my favor here, but yeah, it was quite a long time after that that we started dating, but it all turned out well.
Well, I don't think I could top that story, but one of my main jobs was every other day I would mow the infield. And I would have some form of headphones in, either listen to music or just something to cover all the sounds. But then they would also have music going on around the grandstand. So this was probably like 10:30 in the morning. We'd always have people drop off trucks and things. And every once in a while, the guy would like leave dry ice just in the middle of the concourse. So I'm deep into this, half an hour in. It's a 45-minute job. And I looked down because there was something that kind of popped out the side of my eye. And it was this Mountain Dew bottle that just so happened to fly next to me. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Where did that come from? Because I looked around and then it exploded. It sounded like a shotgun went off. I dove. I was pretty close to having some other issues. And I looked around and I started hearing laughing. It was Prince Fielder and two other guys had taken some of the dry ice, put it into an empty bottle of the Mountain Dew, shook it up, and apparently it will explode after a certain amount of time. And he threw it at me. He goes, "I wasn't trying to get it that close." I said, I was scared. But there were pieces of plastic all over the place. So after the game, though, when I was cleaning up everything and doing most of our duties, he comes up and he goes, "I feel really bad. I didn't mean to get you that bad." And so he gave me his batting gloves that he had for that day. And, I mean, they were pretty old. He was probably going to get rid of them soon anyway. They're getting kind of old. But I started thinking, you know what? I'm going to use them. Might as well. But here's my hand. His was like up here. So I still used them, but they were very hard to control because they were so big. But that's probably my favorite story of all of that. I mean, there's so many other things. Like when I was selling programs, I got really good at knowing from the sound of the bat if that ball was coming straight back behind home plate right at my head. And so, like, there were times I just do this, the ball come through, or if I had people in front of me, I'd have to like get out of the way. And I mean, it was so much like those little things. Brooks Robinson came one time. I think there would have been 2000, and he came with a couple other guys, and he was out on the field, started coming back, and I wasn't really paying attention. I was in the grind at the beginning, and I was making tacos at that time. He came over and just grabbed a taco from me. And he said, let me show you how this is actually done. And he picks up the taco. He goes, you got to put it here. You got to put it here. You got to put it here. This is what a taco looks like. If it doesn't look like this, it's crap. I said, okay. And then he walked away. I said, oh my God, that was Brooks Robinson. Like, it just took me that amount of time. Because that was another one of the really fun stories. All right, done.
Yeah, I remember when Brooks was there.
A lot of pressure on Rob here.
There is no pressure. This story is a winner. But I remember when Brooks Robinson was there, because whoever the GM was that year, like, basically bankrupted the Snappers because he kept bringing all those big money autograph guys in all the time.
Ron Dane.
Yeah.
The UW marching band.
Mm-hmm.
That was when we had like 7 different places for food. That's where we had the taco stand, the Papa John's, and the corn and the Dippin' Dot. I mean, he started adding way too much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So this must have been 07 or 08, one of those 2 years, because I was the beat writer for the Snappers. Beloit Daily News, I would be 23, 24 years old, somewhere in there. And Ryan Sandberg is managing the Peoria Chiefs. Okay. And big deal. I don't know how much you guys remember about this, but it was a huge deal because Sandberg was going to be the next big manager, and he's, taking his lumps like everybody else, working his way through the minors. And so Sandberg is there, and they send out a bunch of press releases like only the beat writer is allowed to interview Ryan Sandberg. They do one like all news conference before the game or before the series starts. It's a 4-gamer. And so all the Rockford channels were all there. The Madison channels were all done interviewing Ryan Sandberg, but I knew I got to talk to him after each game if I wanted to, because I was the beat writer. And I was the official scorer that time too. Well, the way it worked, it was like a Friday, Saturday, that means only 3 games, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So like Friday night, we had to put the paper out. Saturday, we didn't really cover it because we didn't, I was there official scoring, so I watched all the games. We didn't really cover it. And then Sunday, I had to actually write the article for the Monday paper. So the Peoria Chiefs are a terrible baseball team, like fundamentally as unsound as you could ever imagine a baseball team being. Each game had multiple errors. In the second game of the series, I believe, Sandberg got wrong by the umpire. He was trying to big league the umps the whole time, chirping from the dugout, saying how it was bad calls, blah, blah. And I remember when he got kicked out in the second game, Jeff Voss was the GM, and he got on the radio, get down there for Sandberg, get down there for Sandberg, because people had to walk him, because the most unsecure thing on earth is the Beloit Snappers dugouts, having to walk guys back around. So finally it gets to Sunday. The Chiefs get swept by a not very good Snappers team, but they get swept. They had, I think, a total of 8 or 9 errors in the series. In that game, a ball went literally through the shortstop's legs. He went down, just went right through his legs. They had a guy get picked off. Another guy, I think, got caught in a rundown on something, just all these bad things. So I go in, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, I'm about to talk to Ryan Sandberg. I'm a Brewer fan. I hate the Cubs with an undying passion, but I appreciate that he is a Hall of Fame baseball player that I'm going to talk to. I go in there, and I walk in, and I go, hey, here's the box score, and I'm Rob Lucas. I'm the reporter for the Daily News. Could I ask you a few questions? And I put my hand out to shake his hand. And Ryan Sandberg is holding in his hand the crust of a leftover Papa John's pizza. Now, remember how when the pizzas were after the game, we'd give the coaches the leftover pizza, stuff like that. So he's holding this crust of this, just the crust, not even actual pizza anymore. It's just crust of pizza. And I put my hand out to shake his hand. He looks at the crust. He looks up at me, looks back at the crust, and kind of shakes it at me, implying I am not going to set down my pizza crust to shake your stupid hand. And I go, okay. And I kind of holster my handshake back in. And I go, this is a good start. And I go, hey, Mr. Sandberg, you guys had some mental mistakes out there. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you had the error. You had the guy caught in the rundown. Those aren't mental. Those are physical. And I'm like, well, physically you made them, but mentally they were bad. And he gave me about 7 total words about how like we need to get better, and that was about it. And then just stonewalled me the rest of the time, and then I left. And that was my Ryan Sandberg interaction story. And I will go to my grave calling him the biggest jerk I've ever talked to in the world.
Yeah, good one.
Nice. Hopefully, did he finish the piece of crust, or did he put that
I
in
would
the-
assume he did.
Perfect. Oh, well, so that's a good one to go out on. I like that. Again, hopefully we're not going to replace the baseball season or the home opener or the season opener or whatever the next month or two or however long this thing's going to drag on. But if we made you laugh today, at least we've done something right here. So that's good. Appreciate you guys all jumping on as soon as I had this wacky idea a couple days ago. I think it worked out well. It's a good crew. And hopefully there's a couple more games at Pullman Field before we get this new stadium built, and we'll be back start watching the Snappers at some Palace, which would be a lot different from what we've done over the last 30 years. So a lot of good memories there at Pullman Field, though. So it would be nice to see a little more, maybe 1 or 2 more games down there before it was all said and done. Appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed our Snappers sort of opening day montage here.